Those who have already joined, we're just going to give it another couple of minutes here to make sure everyone can be in the room before we start. Thank you for your patience. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, first and foremost, for joining us tonight. This is the first of 2 info sessions we'll be holding this week for the Morris Park and Parkchester Van Ness planning work. Just to note, we will be coming back out in the spring for focus sessions on Hunts Point and Co-op City, but the subject of tonight will be the Morris Park and Parkchester Van Ness station areas. Next slide, please. Just a note for those needing Spanish interpretation, if you click on the interpretation icon, you'll hear a simultaneous interpretation of the session throughout the evening. During the Q&A, staff will also be able to provide language assistance for Spanish speakers as needed. And then also Spanish speakers participants are always welcome to contact us at bmns@planning.nyc.gov, and we're happy to respond in Spanish for you. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we do the event. For those wishing to speak by computer, smartphone, or tablet, there are instructions posted at nyc.gov/engage under upcoming meetings. If you're calling in by phone, please dial into one of the 2 numbers listed below. When prompted with those numbers, please enter the code listed on the page here, which is 832-8069-7434. And then followed by pound to skip the participant ID, and then just 1 for the password. If you're having any technical difficulties at all, DCP staff is on hand to help with that. Please dial any of the phone numbers listed above, and then enter the following meeting ID and password when prompted. That ID is 863-504-3104. And then again, you can just press pound to skip the participant ID portion, and the password is 1. Next slide, please.
Buenas, bienvenidos a la sesión informativa del Bronx Metro North. Las instrucciones para hablar en la reunión usando la computadora, teléfono inteligente o tableta están disponibles en nuestra página web, nyc.gov/engage, en la sección Upcoming Meetings. Si usted desea participar en la reunión por teléfono, llame al número que está en pantalla. Cuando se le solicite, por favor ingrese el número de reunión que está en la pantalla. Si usted está teniendo dificultades técnicas, el equipo de DCP estará disponible para brindarle apoyo. Por favor, marque cualquiera de los números de arriba y luego introduzca el siguiente ID de reunión y la contraseña que están en pantallas. Next slide.
Great. Thank you, Camila. We'll also have some opportunities for Q&A during the event. We ask you to type written questions via the Zoom Q&A feature. And then during live Q&A, you're able to ask questions in one of the following ways. You can either type it, again, using the Zoom Q&A feature, or you can ask it by raising your hand, using the feature to raise your hand. We ask that participants keep their questions to 3 minutes, just so all can have an opportunity to take part. You will be able to unmute yourself and turn on your camera when you are called on by the moderator. If you're dialing in by phone, please press *9 to ask your question during live Q&A. And again, as always, after this session, the project team can always be reached at bmns@planning.nyc.gov. And on the right-hand side there, you can see just some annotations for where the different features are in Zoom. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all for joining us tonight. We just want to give you a preview of what's coming for the evening, and we'll just jump right in. First, we're going to hear some comments from the chair of the Department of City Planning, chair of the City Planning Commission, and director of the Department of City Planning, Dan Garodnick. We'll also hear some remarks from local elected officials, including a message from the Bronx Borough President. We have a message from the MTA, and the MTA is joining us tonight to speak to their work and the next steps there. And then we'd really like to just jump into the planning work. We've been doing this work for 4.5 years now with you and your neighbors and stakeholders in the community. We'd like to just recap quickly what that work has looked like and what it's involved. And then we'd really like to jump into what's new tonight, which is how we take that planning work and really start to bring it to life. We'll talk about land use changes to support housing, jobs, and retail, and we'll step through that section by section. We'll also talk about planned investments in public open space and future conversations there. And then we'd like to end by talking about growing jobs in the borough, but also very importantly, the work of connecting Bronxites to those jobs and those opportunities, not just in the Bronx, not just in the city, but in the region at large as well. And so with that, I'd like to hand it off to Dan Garodnick, chair of the New York City Planning Commission and director of the New York City Department of City Planning. Dan?
Great. Thanks very much, Michael. And good evening, everybody. Nice to be here with you. I am really excited to talk with you today as we take this next critical step to bringing the Bronx Metro North planning work to life. Just last week, as you may know, Mayor Adams announced that we were going to be starting our public environmental review process for the city's Bronx Metro North planning study. And the MTA held a groundbreaking for the new stations, which are set to open in 2027. These coming new stations in Parkchester, Van Nest, Morris Park, Hunts Point, and Co-op City, they are central to the city and state's work to better connect Bronxites to the city and to the region. In two of these communities, in particular, Parkchester, Van Nest, and Morris Park, we see an opportunity to bring new housing, and especially affordable housing, thousands of new jobs, retail, and new public open space. These two stations offer a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the city to plan for new jobs, housing, retail, and much more around the stations. This means housing adjacent to retail, jobs for the future, such as in the life sciences, and expanding retail and community facility options. This is also the time for us to ensure that we're doing everything possible to make sure that Bronx residents, visitors, and workers alike can comfortably and safely access the new stations, and that they have places to rest and places to congregate. This means everything from improved sidewalks to expanded open spaces to rethinking about how we get around the community. It also means thoughtful planning about how we grow jobs in the borough and how we help prepare and connect the residents of the Bronx to these very opportunities. We're really happy to have thoughtful partners in government who are right there with us in this effort. The borough president of the Bronx, Vanessa Gibson, who I had the pleasure of serving with on the city council, as well as two dynamos, council members Velasquez and Farias, all of whom you're going to hear from tonight. I also want to thank the staff of the Department of City Planning They make it look easy pulling this all together to present these plans in a thoughtful way, and also to devise and think about how to advance neighborhood plans. And I do want to recognize their incredibly hard work and diligence in pulling this all together. And I know that many of you who are joining us tonight are intimately familiar with the work that we have been doing to prepare for these coming stations over the past 4 years, and how much work we have left to do. So for you all, we look forward to continuing that conversation. And for those who are new to the Bronx Metro North planning process, you will get a brief overview of the work to date and the work to come. And I will note that we also have Council Member Kevin Riley, who has joined us tonight. Love it. Love that you are here. We really appreciate your commitment and support to thoughtful planning around these stations. It is tremendous, and Council Member, we would love to give you a chance to say a couple of words in a minute too. So thank you all for being here, and to all the participants tonight. We really appreciate your time, your attention to this. We're excited about having a really robust community conversation about how to make sure that we get the very most for the community and for the city out of this plan. So with that, I appreciate it. Michael, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Dan. So as Dan mentioned, we're joined tonight by some of our elected officials. So we'd like to start by giving them an opportunity to say some words here. I believe we'll go ahead and start here with Councilmember Marjorie Velasquez. We might be having some technical difficulty. I apologize for that.
It's fine now. Do you see me? Do you hear me?
Hear you, yes.
Do you see me yet?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Good evening. As the council member for District 13, an area that has been a transit desert for my whole entire life, I'm excited to welcome 2 new Metro North stations, right? I am someone who was raised in Parkchester and certainly now live and represent the Morris Park section of the Bronx. I'm excited to join you all on this evening and hear your questions about the this new exciting project, right? When we're talking about accessibility, when we're talking about just real meaningful jobs, we're here. It's going to play a critical role in supporting the local economy by producing not only thousands of jobs, but providing access to the hidden gems that the Bronx offers. As I mentioned, Morris Park is home to hundreds of local businesses and shops that embody the spirit of our community, and certainly looking forward to making it the hub for life sciences throughout not only the Bronx, but certainly for New York City as a whole. As our communities grow, we must reflect our thriving neighborhoods. This project has been on the table for years, and now the red tape that has hindered its progress for so long is in the process of being removed. And I know many of you have concerns. And right now, me, and as you can see, my colleagues, Councilmember Farias, and certainly Councilmember Riley and Salamanca are here to listen and work together to address those concerns. And so I want to thank Commissioner Garodnick. I want to thank all the agencies that are here, and let's rock. Guys, let's take this moment and build the Bronx better and make sure that we are all growing together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Velasquez. We'll move on now to Councilmember Frias. Councilmember, are you? Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Yes, I'm here. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being on here tonight. As mentioned, I'm Councilmember Amanda Farias, and I'm here to welcome you along with my colleagues to this Metro North informational session. As your city council member, it's critically important to me that the building of this new station is an open and transparent process that prioritizes the existing community and local businesses. This is a real opportunity for our community. We could potentially employ thousands of Bronxites locally and have a new commuting option that could significantly decrease a lot of our commuting time, both into the city for work, but also more north. We can get quickly to Co-op City and even over to Westchester County, where a lot of us travel outside of the community to do our shopping. The less time we have to spend on transit, the more time we get to spend with ourselves, our family, our friends, and that's really important. Ahead of the ULURP application process, it's critical that the city gather input from the community, both virtually and in person, on all the proposed projects, the rezonings, the housing, the commercial space, our Metro North Station creation, etc. Today's meeting is about just that, collecting your input and feedback. Make sure to use this time to express what's important for you to see and what some of your deal breakers are and some of the things you really, really would like to see in our community. I will continue as your council member to work in coordination with all of you and my neighboring colleagues in the council and state to ensure the Bronx Metro North Plan meets the needs of the Bronx first and is directly for the benefit of you and the public. And I just lastly want to say thank you all for showing up for yourselves, and thank you to the Department of City Planning team and our Commissioner Dan Grodnick for being great partners here and having us all give some welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Frias. We're also joined tonight by Councilmember Kevin Riley. Councilmember, would you like to say some words?
Of course. Thank you, Mike, so much. And first and foremost, I want to give a great thank you to Chair Dan Grodnick. We had this conversation as soon as he stepped into this role. He wanted to make sure that he was creating transparent conversations with our community to update them on this Metro North. And I think my colleagues pretty much stated everything I wanted to say. This is a tremendous opportunity for our economy in the Bronx. Right now, representing the Northeast Bronx, we have a transportation desert, especially in Co-op City. And to take even a train to the city sometimes takes about 2 hours. And as Councilmember Faria said, these are time we can spend with our family and also time that we can invest in ourselves as well. And being in traffic, as we all know, can be very, very stressful and not good for our mental health. So this is an opportunity for us to have other transportation alternatives within our community in the Northeast Bronx, a community that has been forgotten for a long, long period of time. So please share any input that you have for this project. This is a tremendous opportunity. And I would just like to thank the chair again for this opportunity to give greetings and looking forward to this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Riley. We have one more speaker tonight that's joining us by recorded video. Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson wasn't able to join, but was kind enough to record a message that we'd like to share here.
Hi, this is Bronx Borough President Vanessa L. Gibson, and I want to thank Chair Dan Grodnick and the entire planning team for holding these very important information sessions on the proposed 4 Metro North stations that are coming to our great borough of the Bronx. I am so excited because I truly know the Metro North stations with access to Penn Station will truly be transformative and a game changer for us in the Bronx. I want to thank all of you for joining us for these info sessions. And I also want to acknowledge many of our community residents, community leaders, transportation advocates, and so many others who have been a part of initial and preliminary conversations before this was in the final stages and was just an idea. Your input and your views and perspective are critical to shaping the 4 Metro North stations that we will see in 2027, and we could not do any of this work without you. So your participation this evening is really about making sure that we continue to have conversations about the 4 Metro North stations. We understand what it means, and we also make sure that it is clearly an investment in economic development and transportation, as well as enhancing our commercial corridors in the Co-op City community, the Parkchester Van Ness Morris Park community, as well as the Hunts Point community. We are so excited, and I thank you all again for participating. The 4 Metro North stations that we will soon see in the Bronx are going to create good paying jobs that really create a pathway to the middle class. Working with our partners in the union sector, we're going to make sure that we provide the important critical jobs that we know are so necessary to creating pathways to the middle class for our fellow residents and families. We also know the commercial corridors, our business improvement districts, and merchants association will truly benefit from the additional foot traffic that we know the Metro North stations will see. Access to Penn Station is going to be a game changer, and we know that this is not only going to be an economic boom for the Bronx, but it's going to provide access to Manhattan as well as Westchester. So I want to certainly recognize my colleagues that represent Manhattan as well as Westchester County. We are truly all in this together, working with all levels of government, investing in transportation, access, and creating these economic hubs that are so vital to the stability of our families. Transportation access is critical to getting commuters around, to and from work, and other necessary travel. And we know that in order for us to reduce the car traffic, in order to address asthma rates and high volumes of dealing with air quality, we need to have modes of transportation and different alternative modes of transportation like Metro North access. So we truly know this is going to lessen the burden on our roads with less vehicle traffic. It's going to take drivers out of their vehicles and put them on the Metro North. And we are so grateful that these ideas are now going to become a reality. So once again, I welcome all of you to our information sessions. Special thanks to Chair Dan Garodnick and the city planning team for all of your great work. As the Bronx Borough President, we are very intentional about the work we're doing because we truly know creating access and opportunity, transportation alternatives, economic development, good paying jobs, supporting our small businesses and our entrepreneurs, local hiring opportunities, create access for our young adults, for the population that's graduating from high school and college, as well as our residents and families in the Co-op City community, the Morris Park community, the Van Ness community, the Parkchester community, the Hunts Point community, and the entire borough of the Bronx. I welcome all of you and look forward to our continued conversations as we build out the 4 new Metro North stations in the great borough of the Bronx.
Wonderful message, and thank
Hi,
you
this is
to all the elected officials who spoke, and thank you, Chair Garodnick. We'd like to hand it off now to the MTA. The MTA has been an important partner. They'll build the stations and operate the service, and they really have looked to us to do the planning work around the new stations. So we're joined tonight by Joe O'Donnell from the MTA, who's going to speak a little bit to the state of the work and next steps, and make sure everyone's caught up on that. Joe.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to Chair Garodnick and the entire Department of City Planning team. As some of our elected partners and city planning have already mentioned, this has been an effort that's been going on for some time now, and we are most appreciative of city planning's efforts to consider some of the things that are outside the scope of the Penn Station Access Project itself, and notably that first mile, last mile elements of the project. For everybody's benefit, some of you may have not been participants in some of the previous meetings that we've held on the subject. We have been out at some of these Department of City Planning visioning meetings going all the way back to 2018, as well as having our own MTA meetings with our elected partners, community-based organizations, and the public at large. So I'll do a little bit of a real quick level set for everybody just to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, give you an update as to where we are and where we're going. Next slide, please. So for those of you who may not be familiar, the Penn Station Access Project will provide new Metro North rail service to and from Penn Station. It's going to upgrade Amtrak's existing Hellgate line, which will improve reliability and on-time performance for intercity rail. As part of that service, we'll be constructing 4 new ADA accessible stations in the East Bronx, which is an underserved area. And we're going to transform the regional transportation system by improving reliability, reducing travel times, and expanding mass transit options. This is an equity project, which will go again create and bolster regional connectivity by delivering a new transit option to the East Bronx, as well as reverse commuting from Manhattan's West Side Central Business District, 2 points north in the Bronx, Westchester, as you heard, and even business centers like Stamford, Connecticut. Next slide. one more, just advance it one more time. So the stations themselves, again, will be along the Hellgate line. You heard Borough President Gibson mention there will be stations at Co-op City, Morris Park, Parkchester Van Ness, and Hunts Point. These 4 new stations will be constructed in the Bronx and connecting vis-a-vis New Rochelle to the New Haven line. This service is the reciprocal of the Grand Central Madison service, which will bring Long Island Railroad service into Grand Central Terminal. Once that takes place, it opens up slots inside of Penn Station for new Metro North service to Penn. Next slide. Some of the project benefits are decreased travel times. Riders will save upwards of 50 minutes traveling from the 4 stations in the Bronx to Penn Station. It's going to create economic vitality. It's going to support local and regional economy, both in the short term from all of the jobs and the induced spending within the Bronx as we build this project, but also from the long term. I think it was Borough President Gibson who mentioned, and I know it was our elected partners also mentioned the fact that Morris Park is a vital science and hopefully it's soon to be a transit hub in the East Bronx. But this is a community that's literally bisected by the tracks and will now be connected by the tracks. So it's going to bridge communities as well, not only connecting you to other points to get to and from the Bronx, but also connecting you within the Bronx community itself. From a sustainability standpoint, it's going to encourage folks to get out of their cars and switch to train travel. This will reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. I think it was Borough President Gibson who commented on the high prevalence of asthma in the borough of the Bronx, and this is going to help improve that by getting folks out of cars and idling and into trains. Those reverse commuting opportunities we've all spoken about, going to get you from Penn Station to the Bronx, to those 4 new stations, as well as Westchester and points north. We're going to optimize existing infrastructure. One of the beauties of this project is that it takes place inside Amtrak's existing right-of-way. We're not going to have to dig new tunnels or create new railroad tracks or infrastructure. We're taking essentially what is a 2-track railroad now and turning it into a 4-track railroad. It's going to help with regional transportation and connectivity by getting folks into Penn Station where they can connect to New Jersey Transit, to Amtrak, to the New York City bus and subway infrastructure. And then it's going to enhance network reliability. This is going to be a game changer for Metro North because right now there is one lifeline into and out of Manhattan for this New Haven line. This is going to provide a secondary lifeline. And as we've seen in severe weather events like Superstorm Sandy, that secondary lifeline is vital to keeping folks moving and keeping the city moving. Next slide. So we're here, City Planning's here to talk to you tonight specifically about Morris Park and Parkchester Van Ness. So to give you a sense of orientation, the Parkchester Van Ness station is going to be located on East Tremont Avenue, right across the street from Dogwood Avenue, I believe it is, and the Parkchester apartment complex. There will be entrances to the new station on East Tremont Avenue, as well as from Unionport Road. Next slide. This is a rendering of what the completed station will look like. Obviously, this is a conceptual rendering, but we are going to be utilizing Metro North guidelines. So it's going to be relatively simplistic, a lot of glass, a lot of wood, obviously the state blue and yellow colors integrated here, but very tasteful, very minimalist design. It's similar to what you see with new Metro North rail stations. Next. Morris Park Station, again, another station where we are literally going to bridge communities. You've got the vibrant medical community and healthcare community on the north side of the tracks in the Montefiore and Einstein health system. And then on the south side of the tracks, you have Hutch Metro Center and all of the great work that they're doing over there. So this train station is not only going to be able to bridge connect folks from the Bronx to Manhattan and the Central Business District, as well as points north. But it's literally, again, going to be a bridge to these two sides of the community. Entry points here for the new station will be on the Bassett Avenue private side, as well as the Bassett Avenue public side. So you'll be able to get to this station vis-a-vis an overpass from either the medical north entrance or on the south entrance inside Hutch Metro Center, just outside of the Marriott that is there presently today on Bassett Avenue private. Next slide. Again, to give you a sense of what the final configuration of the station and the entranceway will be, you'll have your vertical circulation elements on the north and south sides of the tracks, which will then take you up to an overpass and then down to the platform level. There will be stairs as well as ADA accessible elevators at all 4 of these new stations. Next slide. This is just another vantage point of the Morris Park station. Next. A little bit on the timeline. The contract itself was awarded at the end of 2021. In January, the contractor was given notice to proceed. We've been ramping up work in terms of acquiring long lead items, as well as doing clearing and grubbing along the right of way to be able to go and really get after the work. As you see on this schedule, all of the independent elements, the stations, the track work, the bridge work, they all have their own timelines and schedule, and this was done thoughtfully. So in the event that there's a situation that causes us to be nimble and resequence some of our work, we can do that and still attain our 2027 place and service date. So a lot of the work right now is that clearing and grubbing to get things ready for the station work and the track work. We have started some bridge work. And then the next thing will be early in 2023. We're going to get going on the Pelham Lane Bridge. Next. So up next in 2023, we're going to complete all of our design packages. We'll commence draining work at Bronx River Parkway and the Leggett interlocking. Leggett interlocking is critical for us to complete this work safely with minimal impacts to Amtrak. Again, this is a operating Amtrak right-of-way, so we need to do the Leggett interlocking work, which essentially allows us to redirect Amtrak's trains to other tracks away from the work that we're going to be doing for Metro North. The installation of the Leggett crossover special track work components, similar to what I just mentioned, will commence work on Van Nest, Oak, and Co-op City substations. We're going to need new and upgraded power systems in order to run the new and additional service along this right-of-way. I mentioned work on the Pelham Lane Bridge, that will get going early in 2023. And then the first stations to actually see work started on the construction of the stations themselves will be Hunts Point and Parkchester, and that'll be late in 2023. Next. Just some information here for folks. We do have a dedicated hotline and email for community outreach, questions and concerns related to this project. We also have a dedicated web page. So if you wanted to find more information on this project and any presentations that we've given, any of the details surrounding some of the community outreach efforts and where we will be in the community, please go to our web page where you can find all of that information and sign up for updates. You can sign up for updates for the entire project as a whole, or you can sign up for station-specific updates if you're more concerned with one station over another. And with that, I turn it back over to Michael.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much for that overview. If we could go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to quickly step us through and remind everyone of the planning work over the last years, but for the sake of time and so we can get to what's new, we're going to move a little more quickly through this portion. If we just go to the next slide, please. Just want to remind everyone that, this study is really building on a decade's worth of work. On the left-hand side there, you see an image from the cover of a former Sustainable Communities in the Bronx report. I see a lot of familiar names in the participants list, and I know that many of you were part of this planning exercise. There was a report that came out in 2014 that had some initial recommendations for the Morris Park and the Parkchester Van Ness station specifically, and so we really were able to start and build on that work. In the middle, you can see a couple of images. The image on the top is from one of our public workshops, I believe at Morris Park, which we held over at Montefiore Einstein in the Block building just off of Morris Park Ave there. And the bottom picture is from one of our in-person workshops for Parkchester, which was held at St. Raymond's Elementary School. Many of you, again, I see a lot of familiar names, people that would have been at these events, and it's really good to see you're still along with us. On the right-hand side, finally, we have just a screenshot from our 2021 remote open house, where we had to pivot a little, but we wanted to keep pushing the conversation forward in the public conversation. And we really wanted feedback on the draft recommendations that we presented at that moment. A lot of you also participated in that in our remote sessions, or maybe you joined us for office hours, and we're very appreciative. And we hope that you see your comments and your thoughts represented in the updated planning work. Next slide, please. Just a little bit more of a detailed timeline specifically for the Bronx Metro North study. We launched this in the summer of 2018. We went out very quickly with some public workshops for Parkchester, Van Nest, and Morris Park out in the community in the fall of 2018. We had an initial set of recommendations shared at an open house in the spring of 2019. And then we went out for Co-op City and Hunts Point over at the community center at Co-op City, and then over at the Point and Hunts Point, and held some focused workshops there, very well attended. We came out again in the spring of 2021 with a remote open house. This included everything, again, from Zoom sessions. We had some long form surveys. We had remote office hours, and we talked to many of you in many different ways, and are very appreciative of all the feedback we got then. Where we are right now is an important moment. It's not the end of the planning work. It really marks the beginning of taking all of those ideas and those recommendations that we worked through with you and really starting to bring them to life. And that will be the bulk of the remainder of the presentation here. We just want to note that we will still have sessions focused on Co-op City and Hunts Point. We will have other forms of interaction in the spring related to everything from public space to jobs planning and other items. And really we'll be spending the next few years here getting ready for the new stations and making sure that we've done everything we can to make sure that they are fully integrated into the neighborhoods that they'll serve. Next slide, please. This is just a selection of some of the things we've heard over the years. I'll just highlight some of them. We heard a lot about a desire for open space near the stations. We heard a lot about desired roadway improvements and traffic circulation, particularly at Morris Park. We heard about concerns for impacts of any changes on local residents and businesses, and some of the council members spoke to that earlier. We heard a desire for more ways to get around the community, including new kinds of mobility, and generally making it easier to get to and from the stations, but also for people that might live in the community and never take the stations tomorrow. Things like sidewalks and other improvements were constant topics of conversation over the years. And then finally, we heard a lot about people wanting more places to be able to gather and to relax in their neighborhood, and many other items along those lines. This is just some of what we've heard. We have an address at the top of the screen. I encourage you to go there. There's a tab on the history of the project where you can look for yourself and see summaries of the different planning events over the years. Next slide, please. And just a reminder for those that might be newer to the study as well, as we took all of that feedback and we started to try to put it together in a way that we could move forward with. We'd been working with these three categories. Vibrant communities really is about how we plan for growth. And as we say, while celebrating who we are, this can touch on everything from housing and jobs to open space, schools, area history, and many other topics. The second category we call connected communities, which is about how we plan to help people get around the neighborhood, the city, and the region. This can touch on everything from sidewalk connections to roadway improvements and many things in between. And then finally, working communities, which is about how we plan to grow jobs and, importantly, to do what we can to connect Bronxites to them. And so this is what you'll see on the website. You'll see represented there. You would have seen in 2021 as well if you were part of those events. Next slide, please. And then just finally, an important note on the planning work. We just wanted to share these sketches. These had been shared in the past, just to remind ourselves of the progress that we've made over the years. The left-hand image is of East Tremont Avenue, looking towards the east here. And really, we were trying to pull together this vision of an East Tremont Avenue that's not a barrier between the Parkchester and the Van Nest communities, but really a seam that's an inviting street that people can feel comfortable both being on and crossing, that has some additional open space and so on and so forth. And this was, again, an early sketch from the 2021 remote open house, trying to bring that to life. And then on the right, right, we have a sketch showing the future Morris Park Station area, which in this image includes a new world-class plaza to complement the Metro North's very good work here and the MTA's very good work in bringing the stations online. The plaza itself, really importantly, came out of community comments. There was an idea that we needed open space. There were some comments thrown out. One of those is that we should think about a plaza, and we really ran with that. And I think this underscores the importance of the community input in the process. This area is also showing some mix of uses with housing and office and community facility uses, both to support the station, but also to support the institutions in the area. So what we're going to move on to next, and I'm going to hand it off to a colleague, Ton Doiling in our office, is we're going to see in 3 sections how it is we are going to work and planning on working and bringing this to life. First, we'll talk about land use actions, which are important for allowing housing and jobs and additional retail and those sorts of things. We'll then hear about the open space items and how we plan to move that forward. And we have a question for the group in terms of how we should best interact with the community moving forward. And finally, we'll end on the conversation around jobs and how that conversation will move forward in the future, and how we really plan to work to connect Bronxites or to prepare Bronxites for these opportunities, not just in the borough and the city, but in the region at large. And with that, I'll hand it off to my colleague, Ton Doiling.
Thank you, Michael, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. One way to implement the community-driven recommendations is to make land use changes, particularly through zoning. And we will now discuss the proposed land use changes for both station areas, starting with Parkchester Van Nest and then moving northeast to Morris Park. Next slide, please. Here you can see the Parkchester Van Nest station area and how it might look like in the future. The station area centers around East Fremont Avenue, running east to west. And the new train station sits more or less in the middle between White Plains Road to the west and Bronxville Avenue to the east. East Fremont Avenue has for years divided the Parkchester community to the south and the Van Nest neighborhood to the north. And the community-driven vision for this area was really to create an active corridor that ties them together. Specific goals that were developed over the years are to promote fair transit-oriented development that benefits all residents, to encourage the development of a mixed-use, walkable district around the station, and to respond to the context of the surrounding neighborhoods, the Parkchester community and the Van Nest neighborhood, and to encourage welcoming public connections, connecting the station area with those neighborhoods as well. And finally, to ensure quality design for the development on large sites near the train station. Next slide, please. One of the tools available to us to implement community-driven recommendations and realizing that vision is changing the land uses and zoning. And here you can see the proposed rezoning area with the dotted outline. And as you can see, the rezoning area sticks close to East Fremont Avenue and the new train station. And now I will talk through the proposed zoning changes and what they seek to accomplish. As little housing exists here today, to allow for new housing near the new train station and along key corridors, most importantly, East Fremont Avenue, to require the inclusion of permanently affordable housing in new developments there, as well as to allow for local retail and other services that strengthen commercial corridors. Next is to provide controls to shape development and create open space, especially on the large sites, and to create density close to the new station to capitalize on the new regional train service. And finally, to have consistent parking rules that reflect both the local needs for parking and also the improved transit access as the Metro North service will come online in 2027. It's important to note, while we're going to discuss the proposed rezoning, is that existing uses and businesses are allowed to continue after the proposed zoning would be adopted. Next slide, please. I will now step you through the proposed rezoning and what it means for specific areas. And let's start with the section to the west of the new station, centering around the intersection of East Fremont and White Plains Road. We'll then work our way east along East Fremont Avenue before discussing the proposed land use changes in the Morris Park Station area. We realize that this might be a lot of information to take in at once, so feel free to type your written questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. We'll get back to those later tonight, and also We'll make sure to have more resources available on our webpage, and we're looking to continue engaging with you all in the new year. Next slide, please. Yeah, so let's jump in. The first section, to promote activity throughout the area and to offer options for housing near the new train station, as well as to encourage communities serving retail. Those are all goals more generally identified along East Fremont Avenue. We're proposing the mapping of an R7-2 district and a C2-4 overlay here. And the illustrative drawing on the slide provides a sense of what this area could look like in the future under the proposed zoning. You will see these illustrative drawings for all of the sections of the rezoning that we'll step through. R7-2 districts are medium density residential districts that typically allow 7 to 9 stories, matching the existing apartment buildings to the south of this section. And then C2-4 overlays ensure that a wide range of local retail and services are allowed on the ground floors of buildings here. The existing zoning allows for automotive uses, typically in 1 or 2 story buildings. Next slide, please. The second section centers around the north side of East Fremont Avenue, west of the new train station. And over the years, we heard a lot of concern about the impact of these auto repair uses here on the ability of people to walk to and from the future station. At the same time, we've also heard about the importance of keeping land available for auto-related uses. And to balance this, the city proposes changing the zoning here to a C8-2 district. This is a minor change compared to the existing zoning that allows sites that would want to redevelop into 1 or 2 story neighborhood serving retail, such as a bodega or a coffee shop, to do so. And under the current zoning, the parking regulations require an amount of parking that's hard to provide on these narrow and shallow lots, making it difficult for local retail uses to start here in the future if we wouldn't change the zoning. And the existing zoning allows for automotive uses and light manufacturing, typically in 1 or 2 story buildings. Next slide, please. And now let's focus on the vacant block south of East Fremont Avenue between Unionport Road and White Plains Road. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this site. It's sat empty for the last few years and used to have retail stores and a gas station. While this block is not part of the Parkchester community, it does offer an important opportunity to restore the transition between the Parkchester community and East Fremont Avenue. The illustrative drawing on this slide provides a sense of what this specific block could look like in the future. Proposing an R8 district that is a high density residential district that typically allows 12 to 14 stories, matching the buildings in the Parkchester community. C2 overlays would then ensure that a wide range of local retail and services are allowed on the ground floor of this of buildings on this block. The proposed zoning is meant to allow for new housing and retail near the station, also providing enough flexibility and controls to encourage a quality design. For example, providing an internal retail plaza as shown here. The existing zoning, however, allows for automotive uses on the corner of White Plains Road and East Fremont Avenue. That's where the gas station also used to be, and medium density residential on the rest of the block. Next slide, please. And we now move north of the rail line to discuss a block south of Baker Avenue and west of White Plains Road. While the city believes that some additional housing is appropriate on this large site, given its proximity to additional station access at Unionport Road, we also see the site as important to transitioning between the denser buildings south of East Fremont Avenue to the lower scale Van Ness neighborhood to the north. With that in mind, the city proposes a mixed R6-1, R6A zoning that would concentrate greater densities closer to the rail line and on White Plains Road. And then it would step down to lower densities along Baker Avenue to respect the existing character of this residential street. R6 districts typically allow buildings of 6 to 8 stories. Mapping a C2-4 overlay along White Plains Road would ensure that a wide range of local retail uses are allowed on the ground floor here, and that would also help activate this corridor with an additional entrance to the future train station nearby at Unionport Road. Next slide. We'll now move to the second section, which consists of 2 large sites to the north and south of the new train station. Next slide. And one of the greatest challenges raised during the public process was how to create more activity along East Fremont Avenue between Bronxdale Avenue and Unionport Road. This is a long uninterrupted stretch of East Tremont nowadays. And to help provide new housing and community serving retail immediately across from the new station, the city proposes a zoning change to facilitate development on the south side of East Tremont. And this change would allow reaching the following goals: to create a front door to the station for the Parkchester community to the south, using special district rules to shape development on this important site, as well as allowing local retail and creating residential density across from the train station immediately north on the other side of East Tremont, as well as maintaining existing parking for Parkchester residents. Again, the drawing here shows what the site could look like in the future under the proposed zoning, which is an R8 district. It's a high-density residential district that typically allows for 12 to 14 story, while the permitted maximum building heights won't go beyond that of the existing smokestack here. C24 overlays, again, would allow for local retail and services to set up shop on the ground floor. The existing C8-4 zoning allows for automotive uses, including parking garages in multi-story buildings. Next slide, please. This site is currently home to light industrial uses and is next to the Van Nest Connet facility and offers a unique opportunity to meet many of the planning goals identified by the community, including opportunities for new housing, really in close proximity to the station, opportunities for new publicly accessible open spaces, as well as the opportunity to provide an additional station connection from the northeast that would significantly improve the station's access for members of the Van Nest and Morris Park communities to the north of the station, as well as the opportunity for larger retail and community facility uses, considering that this is a significantly large site. The zoning proposed to achieve these goals would be an R61 and a C24 overlay, as well as a special site controls to ensure a quality design that meets community needs. The R61 district is, as I said, a medium density residential district, while the C24 overlay allows a range of local retail and services to be permitted on the ground floor of buildings across this large site. The existing M11 zoning allows for light manufacturing uses, typically in 1 or 2 story buildings. Next slide. And now we move over to the third and final section of the Parkchester Van Nest Station area. And this section covers the Bronxdale Avenue corridor, which runs more or less north-south, and East Tremont Avenue east of Bronxdale Avenue. Next slide. The overarching goals for this section are to create opportunities for new homes and local retail, activate Bronxdale and East Tremont Avenues as welcoming commercial corridors, as well as to support development on these key corridors and step down and provide a transition to neighboring residential streets. With that in mind, the city's proposal is to accomplish these goals by mapping R7-2 and R61 district, both medium density residential district, as well as a C24 overlay along these corridors. Proposed along East Tremont Avenue, the R7-2 districts would typically allow for 7 to 9 stories, significantly lower than the Parkchester buildings across East Tremont Avenue. And then along Bronxdale Avenue, a R61 district is proposed. It's a little less density than the R7-2 and would typically allow for 6 to 8 stories, providing a transition between the larger buildings west of Bronxdale Avenue and the surrounding residential neighborhood. And as I said, the C24 overlays that allow for a wide range of local retail and services are allowed on the ground floor along these 2 corridors. The existing zoning allows for automotive uses and light manufacturing, again, typically found in 1 or 2 story buildings. Next slide. This section along East Tremont Avenue, as well as Poplar Street, is very similar to the previous section. And again, the vision here is to create opportunities for new homes and retail and to really improve this pedestrian corridor east of the station, as well as to step down densities to respect the character of the existing community. Mid-density R61 residential districts that typically allow for 6 to 8 story buildings. That is mapped across this area shown here. And that's very similar to the few apartment buildings that you can already find on East Tremont Avenue here. The C24 overlays along East Tremont Avenue would again ensure a wide range of local retail to set up shop on the ground floor along this corridor. And the existing zoning allows for automotive uses along Bronxville Avenue and low to medium density residential along East Tremont Avenue and Poplar Street. Next slide, please. And that concludes the proposed land use changes in the Parkchester Van Ness Station area. Again, this might be a lot of information to take in at once, and feel free to type your written questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. We'll get back to those later tonight. Next slide, please. And then we move over to the Morris Park Station area. Here you can see how the Morris Park Station area might look like in the future. The station area centers around East Chester Road, running north-south. The new train station sits approximately in the middle between Pelham Parkway in the north, that's on the right-hand side of your screen, and Williamsbridge Road to the south, or on the left-hand side of your screen. And what you see here is really culmination of a vision for tying together the different institutional campuses of the Morris Park Station area. Morris Park is already one of the 10 largest job centers in the city. The new regional rail station and the city's planning work offer an opportunity to create a truly world-class jobs campus here in the Bronx. And among the goals developed over the years are to create a neighborhood center that supports transit-oriented development, area institutions, as well as job growth, and to promote fair transit-oriented development that benefits all residents. Another goal is to ensure easy and comfortable station access. We'll talk more about that also later in our presentation when we'll focus on public space improvements. Also to promote residential growth and local retail along key corridors. And finally, to encourage welcoming public connections that connect these campuses as well as the train station with the neighboring neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Again, you can see the proposed rezoning area with the dotted outline. And as you can see, the rezoning area sticks pretty close to the new train station and the East Chester Road corridor. That is the spine of the rezoning area here in Morris Park. And now I will talk through the proposed zoning changes and what they seek to accomplish. To support the growth of the Morris Park Jobs Campus, the city proposes a zoning framework that as little housing exists here today, allows for new housing near the new train station and along key corridors, to require the inclusion of permanently affordable housing in new developments, to support the growth of educational, health, and life science sectors here in Morris Park, as well as to create density close to the train station to capitalize on a new regional rail service. Also, as we've heard before during the presentation for Parkchester Van Ness, to allow for local retail and other services that strengthen commercial corridors, specifically East Chester Road here, as well as to have consistent parking rules that reflect local parking needs, as well as improved transit access as these stations will come online in 2027. Again, as I said, for Parkchester Van Ness, it's important to note that existing uses and businesses are allowed to continue after the proposed zoning would be adopted. And let's now see section by section what the proposed zoning means. Next slide, please. So the first section focuses on the area immediately adjacent to the new train station. These blocks sit between Bassett Avenue, running parallel to the rail line, and East Chester Road to the west of that. Next slide. Now let's start with the area next to the future station and the proposed plaza. This truly is a critical component in tying together the neighboring campuses with the new train station and connecting the Morris Park neighborhood. Over the years, the community shaped a vision for a station landing and plaza that would concentrate density around the new train station and also allow for both new jobs and housing, while also providing the opportunity for a mix of retail and community facilities. That's not only meant to serve local workers, but also residents and commuters that will be getting on a train at the new train station. And again, the illustrative drawing on the slide provides a sense of what this area could look like in the future under the proposed zoning. The city's proposal to accomplish this vision is to map a C44 district with special rules to encourage buildings adjacent to the plaza to develop in a way that encourages quality public spaces with active uses along the edge of the plaza that might, for instance, be your new coffee spot. A C44 district is a medium density commercial district that allows for a range of commercial uses, retail, but also office and life sciences, as well as residential and community facility uses, such as medical offices. While the C24 commercial overlays that we discussed a lot for the Parkchester Van Ness area typically only allows for ground floor commercial activity, C4 districts allows for multi-story full commercial buildings, as well as a wider range of commercial uses. The proposed C44 district also permits residential uses, and the residential equivalent here is an R8 district. What that means is that any housing here that would be built under the proposed zoning would need to comply with R8 district regulations. As we previously discussed in Parkchester Van Ness, R8 districts are high density residential districts that typically allow 12 to 14 stories. The existing zoning today allows for light manufacturing, typically in 1 or 2 story buildings. Next slide, please. This section is rather similar to what we just discussed, but it provides more of a transition to the surrounding neighborhood, moving north and south of the station plaza that would still allow for a mix of uses and flexibility. The city's proposal to accomplish this is to map a C44 district with special rules, again, to encourage buildings along the Eastchester Road corridor to have active uses along its edges. And again, a C44 district is a medium density commercial district that allows for a wide range of commercial uses, as well as residential and community facility uses. Different from the station plaza that we just discussed on a previous slide, the residential equivalent here is an R7-2 district, which means that any housing built here would need to comply with the R7-2 regulations, and that typically allows for 7 to 9 stories. So you can see we're stepping it down under the proposed zoning from the station plaza to the surrounding area. And again, the existing zoning allows for light manufacturing in 1 or 2 story buildings. Next slide, please. This next section is located north of the future station, more moving toward Pelham Parkway, includes the Stillwell Avenue and the Eastchester Road corridors. Next slide, please. The community-driven vision for this section is to allow for new commercial space on the larger city blocks here, and to promote welcoming and safe and active pedestrian corridors. So that is Eastchester Road and Stillwell Avenue here, and also to support mixed-use development on those corridors and to step down to the residential side streets, as you can see here, Seminole, McDonald, and Rhinelander Avenue. With that in mind, the city proposes the following, that on the large city block between Bassett and Stillwell, that's at the bottom of your screen, sort of below Stillwell Avenue, a C43 medium density commercial district that again allows for a wide range of uses, including commercial, with an R6-1 residential equivalent. That would mean that housing here would need to comply with the R6, which is a medium density district regulations, and that again typically allow for 6 to 8 stories. And within the V-shaped area along Stillwell and Eastchester Road, it's more on the top of your screen, R6-1 districts and C24 overlays are proposed, providing a transition between these corridors and the residential neighborhood that sits in between. C24 overlays again ensure that active uses such as retail can set up at the ground floor on these corridors. The existing zoning allows for light manufacturing. One exception is the area fronting on Eastchester Road, north of McDonald Street. So it's the very top of your screen, where the existing zoning currently is low density residential. Next slide, please. The section here is comprised of the existing medical and educational campuses occupied by Montefiore and Jacobi Health and Hospitals, as is outlined here. Next slide, please. The goal for this specific section is to support the growth of these institutions as well as the life sciences, and to accommodate the creation of new housing options, including staff housing for these institutions. The proposed zoning seeks to encourage development on key corridors, mainly Morris Park and Eastchester Road, and to improve access to the health campuses here and their connections with the surrounding neighborhood. And to reach these goals, the city proposes a C43 medium density commercial district We've discussed that now a couple of times in the rest of the area. You see it's pretty consistent throughout. And that means that with an R61 residential equivalent to that C43 medium density district, and that would mean that you could see 6 to 8 story housing developments here. The proposed zoning matches the proposal for the area on the opposite side of Eastchester Road, as we just discussed on 2 slides ago. The existing zoning allows for low density residential and community facility uses, such as healthcare and educational facilities, the uses that you find here nowadays as well. Next slide, please. And this is the last section. This section also sort of connects to the Parkchester Van Ness Station area that we discussed in detail before. And this section centers around the existing Montefiore Einstein Cancer Treatment Center on Eastchester Road and along the surrounding corridors, the Williamsbridge Road corridor, as well as the Eastchester Road corridor on the south side of the rail line. Next slide, please. For this area, the goals are to facilitate the growth of healthcare institutions in the life sciences here in the Morris Park Job Center, and focusing on the corridors and strengthening those. Similar to other sections in the Morris Park area that we just covered, the city proposes a C43 medium density commercial district on the large blocks. So those are to the right-hand side and the top of your screen. And then R61 medium density residential districts with a C24 commercial overlay along the Williamsbridge Road and Eastchester Road corridors. The C43 zoning would then allow for full commercial buildings or community facility buildings on those larger sites, while with a C24 overlay on the smaller portions in the left-hand side at the bottom of your screen would more allow for a ground floor retail with residential above. The existing zoning in most of this section allows for light manufacturing, and one exception is the area fronting on Williamsbridge Road, where the existing zoning is currently low to medium density residential. Next slide, please. This section concludes the overview of proposed land use change for both the Morris Park Station area and the Parkchester Van Ness Station area that we discussed prior. This really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to capitalize on the new regional train service and support this Bronx Job Center in Morris Park. Again, as I said, a lot of information, and we'll now have a brief Q&A where we'll respond to questions that were posted during the presentation.
Great, Sun. Thank you. We're going to start with a couple of questions. We have a very active chat right now, so we want to choose a couple questions from there and then also offer the opportunity to those raising their hands to ask questions. So I'm going to start at the top here. We have a couple of questions about the service itself and the connections. I don't want to speak for the MTA. There's a question about the service going south. The trains will go north and south. This is just a reminder. These will go to Penn Station, which is separate from the Fordham Station. So just want to make that clear. We have a number of other questions in a category that I'll just summarize as community resources and also understanding the impacts. One of them is related to schools. This is a question I know we get a lot. I'll just note that the moment we're in right now, this is nothing is finalized here. This is really leading into what we call scoping, which is part of our environmental work. And so on January 9th, and we'll have some additional information on this in a later slide, there will be an opportunity for the community to issue any and all comments related to what Tun just shared there. But I will say that the schools are absolutely something that's studied as part of that. I see some comments about shadows and the impacts of shadows from some of the buildings that were shown on previous slides. Shadows are also definitely something that's studied as part of the environmental review process, and that will be a public process. Those will become public documents. And so I just encourage everyone to keep in mind that you will have the opportunity also to issue comments on January 9th for those. With that, I think we'll go ahead and we'll take some questions from participants with their hands raised. Apologies. I apologize. I'm sorry. I misunderstood how we were doing this. Let me just continue here. Slight hiccup on our first session here. So there are some additional questions, and I'm gonna ask also Tun and some of my other colleagues to jump in on some of these. We have a lot of questions related to parking. These kind of run the gamut, to be honest, from saying, will enough parking to be provided to concerns about too much parking. I think maybe Tun can speak more generally to what's in the proposed zoning framework, and then we can also add a little color to that as well. Tun.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think what I said during the presentation is we're looking to provide a consistent framework for parking requirements here in the area throughout Morris Park and Parkchester Van Nest. We are mostly sticking to what would normally be required for these districts in this area, but we're making an exception to the properties closest to the new future stations, which we'll consider a transit zone. So there a slightly lower requirement would apply. Yeah, that's in short the parking framework.
Great, thanks, Tun. I appreciate it. And for the sake of time, we're going to just speak really quickly because it is a very active conversation that we have here on zoning and other questions, but we also want to give time to share with you the work around the jobs and the open space. So any questions related to zoning, I want to encourage everyone. We'll share information at the end. We'll have one-on-one office hours. If there was anything at all that was confusing or concerns you have, you think we're not doing enough or you think we're doing too much, we encourage you to reach out. But again, we also encourage you to take part in our January 9th scoping hearing, which is really about starting the process of understanding what the impacts of what is being shown tonight might be. And with that, I want to now hand it over to Camila Thomas in our office, who is going to step us through the open space planning work. Camila?
Thank you, Michael. So we've just told you about some of the ways we hope to bring the community's vision for housing, retail, and other spaces to life, but this is only one part of the planning work. Now I would like to share with you some of the ways in which we're working to bring to life the community's vision for open space and connections throughout the station areas to better connect you to the places you love today and the ones you love tomorrow. Next slide, please. So we've heard a lot over the years about the community's vision for a more walkable, more pleasant, and more inviting network of public spaces and pathways. This has included everything from concerns about poorly lit underpasses, needed sidewalks, as well as bigger visions for new or expanded open spaces, among many other items. Next slide, please. At Parkchester Van Nest, more than anything else, we heard about a community vision for an East Freeman Avenue that is inviting and that serves as a welcoming connector between the Van Nest and Parkchester communities, regardless of the new station. This includes a vision for sidewalk improvements and additional crosswalks with a focus on the new station. This has also included conversations about providing additional station connections, such as an easier and quicker option to the west for people walking from the Van Nest neighborhood. To bring the corridor to life and to provide a level of activity that both serves the station and area residents, we heard about a desire to bring retail and housing center around that station. Bronxdale Road, White Plains Road, and Unionport Road were also important focuses of our conversation. In short, how do we make moving north and south of East Freeman Avenue as comfortable and inviting as moving along it? Some of the improvement opportunities we have identified are the expansion of Van Nest Park throughout the mapping of Victor Street and the creation of an additional entrance to the station at Unionport Road. Next slide, please. We've heard a lot about needed improvements over the years. Among the desired improvements we heard about at Parkchester and Van Nest were a plaza space around the new station landing, improved sidewalks, pedestrian crosswalks, and improvements in pedestrian conditions crossing north and south along Bronxdale Avenue. So if you could click the slide thank you. So on the left is our vision for a new East Freeman Avenue and the new station entrance with safer conditions for pedestrians coming to and from the station and improved circulation for vehicles. And the image on the right is what we envision for a future Bronxdale Avenue and for other streets that need improvements that provide a redesign that is both safer and more attractive for pedestrians. Next slide, please. At Morris Park, the new station presents an opportunity to tie together the area's job centers and to better connect to existing and future residential areas near the new station. Creating a quality network of open spaces and public pathways will be essential to making sure that residents, workers, and visitors to the area's world-class medical and educational facilities can comfortably get to and from the new station. Importantly, the MTA has also designed a new station to allow for pedestrian access across the rail line. Over the years, DCP has worked closely to coordinate with adjacent property owners, the MTA, and others to complete those connections. This includes a vision for a public plaza on the west side, as well as property improvements on the east side of the rail line to connect the station to Marconi Street. Next slide, please. Additional improvements include streets that are more active and pleasant to walk along, to be accomplished via a much needed pedestrian improvements to Bassett Avenue, Eastchester Road, and other key pathways. One of the most illustrative examples of the value of public input and continued coordination with state and city agencies is the plaza at Morris Park. Stemming from early public comments about the need for additional space, open space near the station, over the years, the study area has worked with the community, city and state agencies, and area stakeholders to bring to life a vision for the plaza. So if you could click on the slide. So here, these images show you what we envision for the future plaza at Morris Park, and the images on the right, if you could click on those, show our vision for a more attractive and safer streets along the station plaza on Eastchester Road and Bassett. Next slide, please. So this conceptual image presents just one vision for a future plaza at Morris Park, what it could look like based on your feedback that we have received over the last 4.5 years. Next slide, please. This is another conceptual rendering, this time at night, showing the possibilities in different uses, services, and retail, and how we envision the community could come together in the space. We look forward to working and continuing to work with the community, agency partners, and area stakeholders to ensure Morris Park gets this much needed open space and gateway to one of the city's largest job centers. Next slide, please. So to continue that work, now we'd like to hear from you about the type of engagement that you'd like to be part of or interested in the coming year. So please leave your comments and questions in the chat on how you would like to engage with us in the coming year about public and open space network in Morris Park and Parkchester Van Ness.
Thank you for that, Camila. It's certainly exciting rethinking and reimagining our public space. So let's talk jobs. My name is Cameron Burrows from the Bronx Office City Planning, and I'm proud to announce and discuss the workforce and economic development work currently being done by our office and city team in the Bronx. Bringing 4 new Metro North stations to the Bronx creates an incredible opportunity for Bronx residents. The new stations will strengthen connectivity and improve access to more high-quality jobs. We are very excited to be a part of this workforce and economic development process and to center Bronxites in this work. Next slide, please. We are excited to have a very committed and passionate team working hands-on and making this initiative a priority. The 3 goals that guide our efforts are strengthening and focusing on job centers around the new stations, increasing regional access to jobs, which will give Bronx residents more options and opportunities to participate in diverse sectors, and to connect and prepare Bronxites for high quality jobs around the new job centers. And that connection part is very important. Next slide, please. The Bronx is uniquely positioned between 2 major life sciences hubs, Manhattan and Westchester County. That geographic connection combined with new rail service will give Bronx residents a wider range of jobs and careers, existing and new. New rail service will connect Bronxites to robust and fast-growing sectors in healthcare and life sciences. And jobs in life sciences are wide and varied. Jobs such as advanced genomics, biopharmaceutical, cancer research, medical coders, and lab technicians. Investing in our city workforce and in life sciences is critical for leading the way for the next generation of life-saving medical devices, therapeutics, vaccines, and medical advancements. A major priority for our office, city team, and mayor's office is to prepare and support Bronxites for these dynamic and growing industries so that they can grow as these job sectors grow. And the new stations and job centers will be important for supporting and incubating a growing healthcare and life sciences hub in Morris Park. Next slide, please. With more than 23,000 jobs in over 300 medical offices, Morris Park is one of the largest job centers in the Bronx and home to major healthcare employers like Montefiore and Jacobi Health and Hospitals. There's also a cluster of academic institutions like Mercy College and Albert Einstein, and new rail service combined with a robust and growing healthcare and life sciences job sector will connect Bronxites to as many as 10,000 new jobs. Service will also significantly reduce travel times from 90 to 45 minutes to Midtown and reduce travel times throughout the region. And this is a significant quality of life improvement. And our job is to make sure that Bronxites are well positioned and prepared to participate in the growth of the borough and the city. Next slide. So how do we prepare and set up Bronxites for success in a growing economy with new rail service? What does that look like? Well, it requires that we have a fundamental understanding of the needs of the community and engaging them throughout the process, and having a very focused and purposeful approach to workforce development through an equity lens and an emphasis on neighborhood planning. It looks like using a combination of traditional economic and workforce development tools, but also thinking outside the box and being flexible in a fast-changing post-COVID economy. Now, this initial work will lead up to an action plan, a roadmap that outlines how to guide Bronxites to opportunities in growing sectors, connect them to existing and new programs, and better position them to participate in the economy. We will be building on citywide initiatives such as City of Yes, zoning for economic opportunity, and tackling goals highlighted in the mayor's blueprint for economic recovery. We will also be leveraging existing partnerships and creating new ones, supporting our dynamic and robust public university system and building on the incredible work that they do, especially our community colleges, one of the city's best tools for getting people into high quality jobs and careers. I certainly wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for our CUNY system. Next slide, please. We have begun the initial steps of creating a comprehensive list of existing workforce development programs that can be supported and improved, but also looking forward and back. Which programs have existed in the past? Are there opportunities to create new programs? We've also begun the process of organizing and connecting area stakeholders. This is an incredible opportunity for the Bronx, the city, and the region, and we are very excited to help position Bronxites for new opportunities and support our communities. Transit development is community development. It is economic and workforce development. And 4 new Metro North stations coming to the Bronx gives us the opportunity to do this work equitably while centering Bronxites for success in any growth the borough and the region experiences. Now we'll conclude here and pass it over to Michael, who will close us out for today's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron, for that excellent overview of the jobs work, and Camila for the excellent overview of the open space and public realm planning work. We want to just spend a little time talking again about next steps and making sure everyone's aware of how they can continue to participate. We also want to hold a little bit of time to return to the Q&A at the end here. So if we could just go to the next slide quickly. Again, we encourage everyone to visit our website. Importantly, we encourage everyone to sign up for one-on-one office hours if there are conversations you would like to keep having. Those are 15-minute sessions, but you can sign up for as many of those as you like, as long as staff is available. We will continue, as was just noted in the last 2 portions of the presentation, our engagement around workforce development and public space investments. And of course, we'll continue our work on everything related to the portion of the presentation Tun went through on the zoning, those are ongoing conversations. We encourage everyone also to please reach out to our email with any questions. Importantly, again, on January 9th at 2 p.m., we will be hosting a public scoping meeting. If you would like to issue comments at that meeting, whether they're concerns or whatever it might be, you'd like to express their support or whatnot, we encourage you to do so. You can go to NYC Engage for more information on how to do that. You can also see a full set of the detailed scoping documents on our website via the zoning application portal. In the spring of 2023, again, we'll be coming back out for events for Co-op City and Hunts Point. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Michael. So, los próximos pasos serían alentarles y animarles a todos a que se mantengan informados y participen con nosotros en el próximo año. Por favor, visite nuestro sitio web actualizado que incluye nuevo contenido de esta presentación y de otros materiales que estaremos actualizando en nuestra página web. Regístrese para unirse con nosotros a nuestros horarios de oficina en línea. Hable 1 a 1 con el personal del Departamento de Planificación Urbana. Tenemos un compromiso continuo en el entorno al desarrollo de la fuerza laboral y las inversiones en los espacios públicos. Si tiene alguna pregunta adicional o desea unirse a nuestra lista de correo, envíenos un correo al correo que ve en la pantalla. Nuestras próximas reuniones serán el lunes 9 de enero a las 2 de la tarde, cuando tendremos una reunión pública de alcance que será totalmente virtual. Por favor, visite NYC Engage para saber más información sobre cómo participar en esta reunión. Todos los documentos del alcance estarán disponibles en el portal de solicitudes de zonificación, siguiendo el link que va a estar disponible en esta presentación, y en la primavera del 2023 seguiremos sesiones informativas para las áreas de las estaciones de Co-op City y Hunts Point. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Camila. Okay, so we'd just like to spend a little time jumping back into the Q&A. Again, it's been a very lively Q&A. So we'll take the questions that we can, but we'll also encourage, again, please to reach out, whether via office hours or other means. So I just wanted to start with a question. There were a couple of questions asking about existing uses in the area, whether that be a grocery store or the auto uses or other uses. I'll just note that apologies. I'll just note that with the proposed changes that were stepped through, existing uses will be allowed to continue as they are. There are provisions in the zoning resolution that allow for that. You'll see that even to today from changes in the zoning resolution from 1961, in which you might have residential uses in industrial areas or vice versa. There are provisions that allow those uses to continue in the area. We certainly understand the questions, and I think it's a worthwhile conversation if you'd like to dig into it more, to reach out to us either via email or office hours, and we can certainly talk more about that. I'm just looking at the questions coming in here again. We have a couple of questions related to pedestrian safety. Things related to crossings along East Tremont Avenue and Eastchester. Someone has expressed concerns about pedestrian safety between Rosedale Avenue and White Plains Road along East Tremont. They note that during winter, there are sections that snow and ice are never removed, which forces people to walk on the road along with moving cars. The intersection of Tremont and Commonwealth is dangerous for pedestrians due to cars frequently running the light. There's wasted space where sidewalks can be added on Tremont, as well as the fence for the train needs to be repaired. Appreciate these questions. This is a question, and these comments are not dissimilar to things we've heard throughout the years. Camila had gone over the public realm aspect of the planning. This is very important to us. Some of these fixes will come through our work. So for instance, the city is very focused on improving the sidewalk conditions on the north side of East Tremont Avenue in particular. We're very familiar with the poor conditions there, and that it can be impassable at times. We're very interested in improving crossing conditions for pedestrians, understanding where there are opportunities for additional crosswalks. Everything along those lines. I think this is very in line with the work. Again, if that's not a satisfying answer to the individual that asked that question, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to have more of a conversation and also understand your local expertise and where there might be things that we're missing. So we appreciate it. Okay. So I maybe I'll continue with an additional question here. So we have a question as to whether it's the idea that zoning regulations will be changed and then developers will come in and build the new buildings allowed by the new zoning. And MTA is not going to build any buildings, just the station themselves, and that's a question. So I'll start with the second part of the question. That's correct. The MTA will be building the stations. They'll be operating the service. Joe went through a number of the things that they'll need to do as part of that work. There's some substation work. They had on June 22nd of this past year, they had a hearing over in the Hutchinson Metro Center about some of that work. But otherwise, if it's not related to the service itself and the trains, they won't be doing it. What we are proposing is to change where different uses are allowed to be and the densities of those uses. And so nothing we do will require properties to change. We do expect that some properties will change, and we know there is some interest in building things that are oriented towards the stations and add some other additional uses to the community. I want to hand it off now to, I'm seeing that we have a couple of hands up here, and maybe I could get a little help by the team about who those hands are, unless I can, maybe we'll start.
The first raised hand is Michael Beltzer. I will promote him to panelist.
Thanks, Tom. Michael, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Good evening, everyone. Very excited to see that these Metro North stations, regional rail is coming to the area. This is definitely would help me on my trip upcoming to Boston, be able to catch a Metro North train over to New Haven, catch an Amtrak. I think it's very important to run the service right. As of right now, the trains would only come every 20 minutes. That is not supporting 6,000 units of new housing. So we definitely, I urge the MTA to get better on that. Don't know where these trains are going to originate, but they could be packed, which would make this a less desirable option. A lot of people spoke about transportation alternatives, getting out of cars. If we're putting in new stations, these should be the primary modes of transportation. And the scope of work saying things like this plan will provide insufficient parking and will induce 4,000 plus car trips from this project. This is building in climate racism into a plan. So it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's not true when it comes to planning. Planning is an ongoing process. We should be revisiting these plans in 10, 20 years. It's definitely a good start to see what's going on in this plan. But, we're not talking about the improvements to the mobility to get around. These will induce almost 7,000 bus trips. In your own illustrations, there's no bus lane down East Tremont. So are you really doing this as good as possible? You're getting 3,000 more subway trips. 180th Street is going to get more visitors than the two Metro North stations being talked here. Are we seeing similar improvements happening there? In terms of the rezoning, we can't simply say MIH is enough. We need this to be a majority or mostly affordable project to the AMI levels that exist in the community. I think that's something that most of the community does not know goes into these type of projects and what goes into zoning. This would be about $5 billion of development. We should be seeing some real deep levels of affordability out of that.
Thank you for that, Michael. I appreciate the reminder that planning is definitely a long-term process that we should revisit, and we appreciate it. Just the note on the buses and the questions around the buses and the planning there. We have worked and have been working with New York City Transit as the stations come closer to coming online. Those are certainly conversations we're very interested in revisiting and understanding how we get the best connections to and from the stations. Michael, I just want to encourage you, just for the sake of time too, but you are always welcome to reach out to us. And I think starting with our office hours is a really good option, but also the Bronx Metro North Station emailer, if you don't mind. And if you wanted to write up these questions, we'd be happy to jump on and have an additional conversation on that, but also want to make sure to give room to additional participants asking questions here. Thank you, Michael. Okay.
The next person with the raised hand is Robert Press. I will promote you to panelist. You will have 3 minutes.
Okay. Now, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
I was at many of the previous meetings where affordable housing was never mentioned at the open houses. Why have you left out that buildings can be higher than what you're mentioning with bonus heights for community facilities and 25% or more affordable housing? Now, Mayor de Blasio changed the R6 zoning from 6 stories to 8 stories in his first year. And with the community facility and 25% affordable housing, a former 6-story building, now 8-story building, can go as high as 12 stories with the height bonuses. And the 14-story buildings that you mentioned can go as high as 20 stories. Why have you left that out, that they can be even higher than you're mentioning? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So maybe I'll take that in parts. Just on the first note, we have always been talking about affordable housing. The city does have and has had since the mid 2010s a law, which is the mandatory inclusionary housing law. This law requires that any change in the zoning that allows for a significant or an increase in the density of housing allowed. So here, as was pointed out earlier in the presentation, we have a number of areas that would go from currently allowing no housing to allowing housing. These would certainly all fall within the mandatory inclusionary housing rules. That dictates that between 20 and 30% of the units would be permanently affordable under the city's mandatory inclusionary housing law. And so that's just an important note. We think that is an important aspect of providing more options for affordability. This is a range and can go anywhere from 30% to 130% of AMI. And that's also an important point. Bob, I appreciate your question, your comments. I know you're very active in Community Board 11 and elsewhere throughout the Bronx. And again, you are also welcome to reach out.
Can I go? I forgot one point. Will the 15% homeless be part of this, the MIH, from the MIH CQA? Because will these buildings, if these buildings get any city tax breaks or city dollars, they have to have 15% MIH, which is the mandatory inclusionary homeless housing. Am I correct? And are there going to be down zonings where you upzone?
Bob, I understand your question. I'll just say I think there's a little confusion about what the mandatory inclusionary housing requires. The specifics, the term sheets of the mix of units and whatnot, that gets worked out later as actual developments come online. In the conceptual stage, there is no requirement across the board. For instance, for homeless shelters or formerly homeless, the specifics of agreements that come later, we can't speak to now because those would come in the future as developments are proposed and as those term sheets are agreed upon with housing preservation and development. I think we're well beyond our 3 minutes, and I apologize, Bob, but we do have other individuals with their hands up in the room. I want to encourage you to reach out and we can continue to have the conversation on this, Bob.
The next person with a raised hand is Luke. I'll promote you to panelist. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, thanks so much. My name is Luke. I am a resident in the neighborhood, and I am going to be directly improved my transit access by these projects. So I'm really excited I just went to Boston, had to go all the way down to Penn Station to go back up to Boston along this rail corridor. So can't wait for this. My only thing is that these rezonings are really underwhelming. You've described it. I'm not sure if you've answered these questions in the Q&A already, but these rezonings you describe as a spine. You know, our housing crisis, our affordable housing crisis demands a rezoning with body. The radius of impact for this transit improvement is going to be far wider than just the adjacent lots. I don't understand why we're focusing so narrowly when our crises are so large in scope, and this presents such a wonderful opportunity to allow for greater density, especially when there's going to be so many more improvements when it comes to transit. Can you explain why you haven't gone, a half mile, a quarter mile from each station when you're considering rezonings, and you've stuck so narrowly to the adjacent lots? Can you explain how far into the neighborhood will these stations improve the transit access for? Thanks.
Thank you, Luke. I appreciate the question. I just want to acknowledge, I know there was an exchange that you had begun in our Bronx Metro North mailing list. So I'll start by saying the following. I appreciate it. I just want to note for the attendees as well, this is a good illustration of the work that we've been doing over the last 4.5 years, which is really balancing competing priorities with the community. We heard from Bob about concern about the amount of new development being added and whether or not it would be balanced with down zonings. We're now hearing from Luke about a desire for much more development than that's been showing in the proposed rezoning. This is always difficult. We 100%, Luke, agree and recognize that there is a housing crisis at the moment, and we've been very focused on working through a plan that we could come to some consensus with among the many competing opinions within the community over the years that we've heard. I want to acknowledge as well that Bernadette Ferrara, who's the head of the Van Ness Neighborhood Alliance, has also put some questions into our Q&A related to concern about some of the densities here. And so we've always been trying to balance this. We think we've come to a good balance that concentrates density near the station. This is really important service, and we're very excited about the service. But it's important to note that this is regional rail service, and that these trains won't run at the frequency of subway trains. And so we want to balance that with the amount of growth that could reasonably be accommodated without overextending it. But that doesn't mean the conversations end in either direction. There could certainly be future conversations, Luke. Perhaps you have specific areas in mind and you'd like to reach out to us. In our office hours, for the purposes of this and this study, this is what we're going to look at in terms of impacts, and this is the scope of what we're looking at on the January 9th event. So again, I really appreciate it. I hope all the attendees appreciate the range of opinions that you're hearing just on this conversation now, and understand that it's never easy to come to consensus on projects, and we've been working hard, and we understand that perhaps not everyone's going to be happy with all the various outcomes. Thank you, Luke.
Our next speaker is Peter Hamilton. I'll promote you to panelists. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Peter Hamilton. I'm a member of leadership for Parkchester Watch Group. We are a renters and owners association for Parkchester North and South Condominium. I'm reaching out because we have grave concerns about parking. We noticed on the south side of East Tremont, where 2040 East Tremont and 1990 East Tremont, the area that garages are Parkchester's garages currently are located is to be rezoned for residential. We have concerns that this makes it more lucrative for the sponsor of the condominium to tear down those garages and build residential buildings. They already tore down a garage on a different part of the complex and built residential buildings. We're concerned this might make it even easier. In addition, you mentioned about unified parking rules in the area, but didn't go into depth with that. So I have a question about what that would be. And also, our concerns are that putting the station neighborhood, which we support and we are looking forward to, is what city-built parking structures are being built, if any? Because our concerns are, yes, there'll be public transit to get to the station, but some people refuse to take a bus to a train. So our concern is the parking will just get worse. As it is, street parking, people can drive around for 45 minutes to an hour and not find a parking space. Can you please elaborate more about the zoning change and why on the south side it's being changed and possibly threatening our current parking situation, and along with the other questions as well? Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the question, Mr. Hamilton. Yeah, for the south side of East Tremont, where the Parkchester garages is, I hear your concern. We've engaged with elected officials for your area and also with residents and are aware of this concern. For that specific area and site, as was also briefly mentioned in the presentation, an objective there is to maintain or retain the existing parking that is made available to residents, Parkchester residents, who have a parking spot in those buildings. So that would have to be a part of any future development there. And in addition to that, future development would need to meet their parking needs, as they would have to do anywhere else in the city as well under the zoning, and we're not seeking to change those rules and lower it for this area. So it would still be the same zoning requirements for parking in this area, while looking to retain the existing parking in the Parkchester garages that is made available to Parkchester residents.
But just to clarify, if they wanted to tear down those garages, now it's zoned residential, that would be they still can do that, correct?
There would be special controls in place to focus on retaining the existing parking made available to Parkchester residents on that side.
Can we kind of make an appointment to talk about this further? And then also, is the city planning on building any other parking garages on any other sites in the area? Because we're concerned that this station will just draw more people to park in this area.
Yes, that's a good question. The Department of City Planning itself is not a capital agency, so we don't build our own developments, but I understand your question and the concern about parking. For instance, around the Morris Park Station area, there's also an existing need for parking. The proposed rezoning would also allow for more structured parking to be built there in the future, and to alleviate the current parking issues there.
Okay, and then can you provide more clarity with the
Mr. Hamilton, we still have other speakers in the queue.
Okay, my time's up. That's fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hamilton, for your question, and thank you, Tom. We're about 20 minutes past the scheduled close of this, and we wanted to take a couple of more questions before we close and just provide, again, a final reminder of how you can reach out to us and have some of these conversations that people clearly want to keep having with us.
Our last speaker is Bernadette Ferrara. I'll promote you and you'll have 3 minutes. Bernadette, you should be able to turn on your mic and your camera if you like.
Okay, there I go. Well, I don't know. Well, I trying to turn my video on, but it's not going on. And that's okay if it's not. I'll continue with my questions. First of all, I'd like to thank the city planning and everybody involved in this huge project before actually taking into consideration communities that are affected around the whole area, especially smaller areas like Van Nest, because we are a low density community. So I know I speak for many people when I do appreciate that. But one of the you can see by my questions is there are two areas where there are extremes, and I hope we can have further conversations about that with the regards to the Baker Avenue height with the zoning, and also the one between East Tremont Avenue between White Plains Road and Unionport. That seems to be almost double the height of any of the buildings in Parkchester, which would hopefully we can have a balance there. But I just want to make a note that what many people are very concerned about is our areas of Community Board 11 have been inundated with proposals for homeless shelters since December 18th of 2018 up until just recently. So we are very sensitive about the mandatory inclusionary housing and the options and the plans that are going to be part of that. So my question is, will that be going into more detail in the future to the public, to the communities?
Thank you, Bernadette. And I know you and I had spoken just recently, and so I appreciate you joining tonight, Bernadette. On your first question related to those specific sites where you had concerns by Baker and then the other site that you mentioned in the chat, I want to encourage you, one, to please make sure you join the scoping hearing and
I will.
Comments there, and you can issue those in writing as well. And that, of course, holds for everyone here. In terms of the nature of any future development under the proposed changes. One, right now, these changes would take some while even to begin the process of changing them. Where we're going right now in January is the scoping process, which is about hearing from the community about concerns, but also studying those impacts. And so getting into the specifics of the mix of units or what kind of affordability would be included in any specific development, it's just very premature to have those conversations because it's very much hypothetical at this point. And it would be some time before those changes even went through, before anyone could even take advantage of them. But Bernadette, you know how to reach us, and again, I encourage you to please join the scoping meeting and issue your comments there, particularly on those first two items.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I think we're going to need to end it there, but we had a couple questions in the chat from a couple of individuals, Christy Marmaroto, as well as Matt Caulfield, related to the presentation that you're seeing tonight. So we wanted to make sure everyone is aware that we will be posting this. This is live streaming now on YouTube and will be available on our YouTube channel. So anyone that wants to go back and watch it or wants to share it with your neighbors or other members of the community, please do so. That will be available to you. And then just one final note, if we could go to the next slide quickly. Since this clearly there are plenty of you that would like to keep having conversations with us. So we have a very easy way of setting up those conversations. You don't have to call our phone and hope you get us at any given moment. Well, we have a website. You can use this QR code here. And what you'll see there when you get there is a calendar with availability for 15-minute segments where you can talk to us. We track all these conversations. We did this in 2021 and had a number of great, very focused conversations with individuals. And so we encourage you to sign up, please. You can put in a note about what you want to talk about if you like, but you can just sign up and then we can have the conversation when you're there. So with that, we encourage you to do that. And we would just like to close the meeting saying thank you again for spending a good chunk of Tuesday evening with us. And we appreciate all your feedback. Thanks, everyone.